Before we get into the other items, I will just recap our consent agenda. We have elected to put 3 items on consent. If you wish to have any of these heard, we can hear those and you can make comment on them. Those 3 items are Chapman Kyrene Body Shop, Moon Spa, and Alum Residence. Is anyone here with us that wishes to have one of those cases heard? Yes. So do I need to speak up for you a little bit, sir? Okay. We have 3 cases on our consent agenda. These are cases that we would approve without hearing unless somebody with us wants to have these cases heard. Those 3 cases are Chapman Kyrene Body Shop, Moon Spa, and Alum Residence. Do you wish to hear any of those cases? Are you? Yes, okay. We can keep that on consent agenda and approve it without hearing it if you like, or we can hear it. Do you wish to have that case heard? Okay, then we'll just approve it. How about that? Wasn't sure which side of the fence you were on there. All right, so we'll move forward with that consent agenda as it is. And we also have, we will hear 707 South Forest Apartments and our code text amendment on short-term rental ordinance. First item of business, though, is approval of meeting minutes from August 26th. We've reviewed those meeting minutes and found some corrections from Commissioner Brown. Those have been noted. Can I hear a motion regarding the approval of those meeting minutes, please?
So moved.
All right. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right. Motion to approve those minutes from Vice Chair DiDomenico, seconded by Commissioner Johnson. All those in favor by show of hands, please. Opposed, if any? And in abstention. Okay. Motion passes 5-0 with Commissioner Amorosi in abstention. Now we have our consent agenda. Can I hear a motion regarding its approval, please?
I move approval of the consent agenda.
Can I hear a second? Second. All right, motion to approve from Vice Chair DiDomenico, seconded by Commissioner Amorosi. All those in favor by show of hands, please. Opposed, if any? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you. So let's move on now to 707 South Forest Apartments. I'm going to scroll through really quickly here, if you give me a moment. If we could invite our applicant to come to the podium and tell us about your application.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're doing things differently now. No staff presentation. Woo. I usually just say what she said. I agree with everything. Should I speak now? Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Darren Sender Associates. Ooh.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. I brought copies.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah. Do you want me to wait or?
Can you zoom in so we can read that?
Okay, I'll wait. I've got copies. This is not our building.
We were having trouble with the screen because of a bad cable issue today. So hopefully this comes back. Nope. Pull it back out and redo it.
That's right.
Well, we may have to trust our memories for the time being.
Oh, well, there we go.
Okay.
Oh yes, now's a good time to mention, I forgot to, if you're with us and wish to make comment on one of our cases, find one of these white cards over at this table here and fill it out and give it to our helpful city staffers over here. We can provide you 3 minutes to make a comment on whichever case it is.
to look at the screen and maneuver. Yeah, we were kind of afraid of this today. It was-
Was it that true? You press the right control. It's usually function F4, but it's not seeing it now.
Peaceful and some boards were great.
Because on Gales,
Perhaps Ms. Sender can just gesture dramatically, describe everything.
Call. Okay.
I can show you.
Oh, there it is. Why does it keep not doing the full screen for me and bring that? Okay, there we go. Why does it? Why is it doing that here?
I don't know why it doesn't work.
Okay. Thank you, Darren.
Awesome, thank you. Okay. Again, Darren Sender, Sender Associates, 464 South Farmer Avenue, Tempe. Here representing Trinitas Development. We have Jeff Knabel, I said that wrong. Jeff Knabel and Linda Irving from Trinitas, and then Linda will introduce the rest of the development team. We will have a presentation by the architect as well to go through all of the design drawings. This is a project at the southeast corner. You're probably all familiar with the staff report, southeast corner of 7th Street and Forest, directly adjacent to the Opus project, directly east, and it currently has some single-story buildings on them, was home to several different things, including, this was the art store, wasn't it? This was the art store. I went there a lot in school, and transitioned into a few different things over the years, a restaurant most recently that was really, really good. And the union had their rental office there for a while. So now it's vacant. There's a couple other grooming humans in that property right now, and then there's a parking lot to the east. We're here to develop a project under the major development plan review. So we're here just for the DPR. We have no variances, no use permits, and we're developing under the existing PAD that was approved in 2009. So we're developing within the envelope of that PAD. And basically what we've tried to do is maintain the integrity of that original approval and make sure that the building and the design has been significantly upgraded to current developments. Cool things, beautiful colors, lots of more urban atmosphere at the base level. Working with staff has been amazing. Lee and Suparna have been very, very helpful. Chad and Ryan as well. Really helped shape this project. You know, the pedestrian realm is very, very important. So a lot of the pedestrian elements here are speaking to the people coming up and down the street, going into the retail section, the residents coming in as well as an apartment project, and in making sure that it's parked appropriately as well. So in taking advantage of its location, taking advantage of you know, the site's amenities, what's around it, a lot of the transit and other elements there. So we also have tonight, working with our neighbors, I've talked to Opus Development, obviously, about the project. I've talked to a few others in the area. I've talked to Wexford. We've spoken to the church. We're actually meeting with them tomorrow. So we've talked to them. We've been working with ASU. We've had several meetings with ASU, talking with them again tomorrow. Sent them all of our information. They're familiar and aware of all of the drawings and everything that we've submitted. Sent them a full submittal package as well. So working with that, we have right now 2 letters of support, which we're really proud of. Thank you, Trevor, for working with us on this. The Catholic Newman Center, All Saints Catholic Church, as well as one from Trevor, who understands the downtown pretty much as well as anybody. So we're really happy with that tonight. So we've got some good neighbors, and we think we've got an excellent project that's really going to be outstanding for the downtown. With that, I'll turn it over to Jeff, and he can talk briefly about Trinitas.
Thanks, Darren. Hi, good evening. My name is Jeff Knable. I'm with Trinitas Ventures, and really like to echo what Darren was saying, and like to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the commission members for your time and consideration of this project. Certainly like to say thank you to the city staff. They have spent many hours with us. They've provided answers to our many questions and helped guide us in the design of this project. So really appreciate them helping our team. We consider this project to be a flagship asset for Trinitas, and we're very proud to be considered by you this evening in this wonderful city. And so just wanted to say that and thank you again. I'd like to introduce Linda Irving. She's a design and development manager with Trinitas, and Linda will introduce the rest of the team.
Good to see you again. Glad to be here tonight. Basically, my job is the development manager and general air traffic controller for this phase of the project, and I've been very thankful to be working with a very talented group of consultants with CSO. We've got Dan, who's going to present the project as a follow-up to our prior meeting. We have Mark Beyer with the design element. We have George Kroll with Hogart Wilson. We've also been working with Peterson Associates on the engineering components, and behind the scenes, we've had a lot of help from APS as we've been developing our plan. So a good group of people has been working really hard behind the scenes. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dan Brugger to present our project.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you for the opportunity to walk you through the project tonight. There it is. Okay. Okay. All right. Next. No, this is the project location, as Darren described, is at the southeast corner of 7th and Forest Avenue. Project site indicated there as was previously discussed. And then on the next slide, I think this is just an aerial view of the same thing. It's got some of the adjacent properties, some of the newer construction projects noted on it, the Mirabella, the Weston, Union Tempe is, of course, immediately to the west of us. So just a general overview of where we sit, where the development is taking place. This is a site plan. We will have a clearer, larger site plan a little bit later in the deck that can kind of walk you through the ground use of the building and what's occurring there. I trust you all have paper copies too, but we'll get into the detail of that first floor here in a little bit. This is a rendering from the northwest. I will point out that for clarity, we removed a one-story building in the foreground, a one-story commercial building, just to get a broader view of the building. So we were prompted by staff to make that note. We're not obviously changing any or wanting to change anything on that site, just for clarity. The basic intent in this design is to try and provide, like Darren said, a rich experience at the pedestrian level using a combination of colors, materials, and textures, and especially pay attention to the rich visual experience that pedestrians would have, or motorists, at that base level. We're doing that by locating commercial space and leasing on the ground floor. We have a canopy that can shelter pedestrians at the building edge. You don't see it in this rendering, but we'll have a close-in later that shows kind of a wood look soffit underneath that canopy. The next, from levels 2 through 5 of the building, are comprised of parking garage. We are proposing to wrap that parking garage with a combination of different types of metal panel. There is a lighter colored, opaque, non-see-through metal panel that delineates the frame of the garage. And then we're looking at 3 different colors of perforated metal panel to screen the garage. Going up in the building from the 6th floor to the 19th floor are apartment units. The building is still, from the 6th level up, is still configured in an H shape and plan, which was the shape of the building in the previous pad. And then at the top of the building, we have amenities features and a rooftop terrace. And essentially what we're trying to do from the point of the 5th level up is direct the eye upwards, gather together the windows into vertical groupings, and a fine line design that terminates in a cornice at the top. This next view looks at a nighttime rendering from the same perspective. The main intent here is, of course, to draw the eye upwards and showing how we could illuminate the lids on the top of the building to provide an interesting termination feature at the top. This is that close-in view of the pedestrian view from the northwest corner of 7th and Forest. There is a hardscape corner at the radius. We're showing the mix of planting materials that Mark at the design element has specified, and we'll get into the actual landscape plan here in a bit. But then that shows you the rich wood look metal soffit and then the mosaic interesting pattern of the garage screening above. This view is from the southwest. The only difference on this view is you do see at the top a largely glass feature, which is the indoor part of the amenities on the 20th floor. And we were requested again by staff to show this view. This is moving yourself into the street to look at the building from kind of the west-northwest. You're catching a glimpse there. There's really, like I said, an H-shaped plan linked by a circulation core in the middle, so you're really seeing the north part of that lobe or tower. This is the east side of the building that we're looking at. We did take staff's recommendation to provide an interesting decorative pattern toward the base levels. We are right up against the property line of the property to the east, or 3 feet away from it. There is a restriction there that being that close, the amount of openings on that side is very limited by the fire code. So it had to be a little bit more of a solid side. But again, we did take the consideration to heart of providing at least some decorative aspect to it in that rich pedestrian zone. We'll walk through the elevations here next. What you just saw in the renderings we're describing in 2-dimensional detail. This first one is a section really that's cut through the courtyard as if you're looking north or south. You're seeing that circulation core in the middle. I think the next ones are probably a little bit more descriptive of the project. So in this one, for example, you're seeing the largely glazed commercial leasing at the base with entrance to parking. Again, levels 2 through 5 are the parking screened with perforated metal panel. And then up above that, we have a combination of materials. We have 2 shades of colors of ephes, which are both within the light reflective values stipulated by the city. We have a combination of solid aluminum panel or solid color aluminum panel, and then an aluminum panel that has the wood look on the feature corners on the northwest and the southwest. Again, just showing all sides of the building. This is a photograph of the material board that was submitted for the project. You're seeing the 2 shades of ephes, the wood look metal panel, a variety of colors of the metal that's used at the garage level, and then an example of a perforated screen that would be akin to what covers the garage. Yeah, please. This is the site plan that we developed with Mark at the design element. I don't know, Mark, do you want to speak to any particular plannings at this time, or we could come back to it either or?
Just a quick rundown.
Yeah, sure. Sorry.
Good evening. My name is Mark Beyer from the Design Element, and so we worked really hard on this landscape plan to ensure some continuity, so the streetscape is consistent with its surroundings. So on 7th Street, we're using an elm tree that you'll see along 7th Street, and it's happening on the adjacent properties, as is on Forest, we're using an oak tree, which is consistent. And then as those are larger trees, there is a smaller, to help at scale, a Coscolote tree to kind of just help provide additional shade and maybe some comfort, but just to kind of help bring that pedestrian scale down. The ground plane is made up of 2-foot height kind of septed plants that you'll see in and around the city, namely some grasses and some succulents. And from the last presentation, we addressed the corner concerns that I heard about aloes. So we made adjustments to that and replaced those with more of the grasses and some other flowering ground covers. The hardscape, you'll find we're using that historic brick along 7th Street. You'll see that. So that's consistent with what's happening. And then, yeah, everything is low water use and kind of desert appropriate. So happy to answer any questions at the end.
Thank you. This is the larger ground floor plan. Forest, obviously, on the left, 7th Street up at the top. The top third of the first floor, the northern third of the first floor, is comprised of about 5,000 square feet of commercial space. We were purposeful to locate along the south, along the alley, a lot of our infrastructure, our transformers and trash and things like that, so they're in as screened a position as possible. We also have a ramp to the parking garage where we work with staff to make sure that the entrance to that ramp is aligned with the curb cut to the ramp to the Union parking garage across the street for safety and ease of traffic flow. And then the center part of the building in the first floor is comprised of leasing amenity space and some back of house mechanical spaces. Transitioning, we'll get to the parking garage. This is the sixth level, or really levels 6 through 19, I'm sorry. An H shape as the original pad building showed. North and south lobes of the building are symmetrical, identical, apartments on either side with a stair and elevator core in the center. At the sixth level, there is a terrace. There's one on each side, one that faces east and one that faces west, right on top of the parking garage. Again, at that level, we're also introducing landscape that is regionally appropriate. The landscape there also helps to create a safety barrier around the edge, so there's a 3-foot offset to kind of help keep people further from the inside parapet of the building. This is the 20th floor, the top floor plan. So on the south side, there is an enclosed amenity space with a small deck on the west side. And then the north half of the building is comprised of an outdoor terrace and a pool. So this is the only part of that upper floor that isn't quite symmetrical. And again, even at that level, we've also got a landscape buffer around the perimeter of the building to discourage people from getting too close to the edge. And we've got the 6-foot safety rail in working with the city on the inside edge of that planning for safety, obviously. The section of the building I'd call out here that we're still abiding by the 235-foot maximum height that was stipulated in the initial pad. We're up to that point, but not above it. You can see here we've got the ramp and the garage levels at the first 5 floors, and then the apartment decks above that. I think we can kind of proceed through these sections. We did work with both the police department and the city to make sure that we were doing everything we could to encourage safety on the balconies. So we feel that by positioning the balconies far enough apart, we'd like to think we would discourage any risky behavior that someone might be tempted to engage in on the balcony. So it was our intent, like I said, to keep those far enough apart so there's no temptation to do anything from balcony to balcony. We can go, into the additional material. This is just a cover sheet of the pad. We can skip to the next slide. The first floor that I spoke about, I think from here we'll build up through the parking deck levels. On the next slide, we should be going to the second floor. So I think someone had asked, why are there 5.5 levels of garage? Each west half of the garage is a flat plate, and each east half is the sloped plate, and it just so happens that we end on a sloped plate on the east side, so we called it a half level, or we called it the 5.5 level. We are making sure that the utilities on the south side, the transformer, et cetera, have the required 30-foot clear height above them so that they can be extracted when need be. So that's why you see some cutouts on the south side of the parking deck. That happens up to about the 4th floor. I should note we have bike storage in the building. We have a bike storage room on the first floor that is accessible from grade. We also have other bike storage that occurs throughout the parking deck as you go up, so it's really interspersed throughout the building. And this takes us up to the 6th floor, which we already discussed. Typical floors 7 through 19. I think we can skip ahead. The rooftop unit, we are screening all the mechanical equipment that does occur on the roof with a similar strategy to what we're doing on the garage, but instead of the panel screening the equipment on the roof, instead of those being perforated, they're solid, they're opaque at the roof to prevent sight lines to the mechanical equipment. Next one. There's just black and white copies of the elevation. We did meet the request that staff had to provide a fire access plan. You're seeing that here where we're locating the fire access routes. And I think the next plan was the refuse plan that was requested by the city to guarantee that we've got the appropriate radius to bring a truck in to access the trash, and also the section cut on the side illustrating that we've got the required clear height above the trash and the transformers. Just the site context plan, we can skip ahead. Photometric plan, we did do shade studies of, I think there are shade studies in here of the summer solstice, the winter solstice, and then both equinoxes at 4 times a day. Again, very much in line with the building that was proposed in the initial pad. And then we did do a shadow study specifically at the base level to account for what the trees that Mark spoke about, what they would screen. This is at 3 p.m. on June 21st. So really you're getting a lot of shade already falling on the site from the equally tall Union project next door. But we were very intentional to try and provide shade to the pedestrian experience at that level. And that concludes the presentation. We welcome questions at this time. Yes, why the commercial space is now 6,000 square feet instead of the 5,000? It's 5 now, so I think it used to be 6. So I think the question is why the reduction in the commercial space. We did one thing at the base of the building to provide a better pedestrian experience. We pulled the glass on that commercial space in a couple feet, and that provides more canopy coverage out of the sun and out of the weather for pedestrians navigating around that. And I think trimming that little bit of pullback is what pulled that space from 6 down to 5.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
So we're very pleased with the hard efforts of the team and what they put forth tonight. We're here tonight to ask you for approval for us to proceed. Questions, feedback?
Hey, commissioners, questions? Commissioner Brown.
I have some questions about, I guess, the nuts and bolts of the site plan. And I'm not sure which of your team, perhaps your architect's the best to answer that. This is essentially a square site, so you have sort of an H shape to get some glass for the apartments. What happens if a similar building is built also 3 feet 1 inches away from the property line to the east? Right now it's a parking lot, I assume that's current. You've got some AC units and some. Well, first of all, that space would be fenced off, I assume, so it's not a homeless alley.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Brown, that's an excellent question. In fact, that's one of the reasons we're working with Trevor and the church as well. We pulled the building off for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, for building code purposes to allow some openings there, but mostly to allow development to occur next door. And absolutely, that would be something that would have to be fenced off and screened. It happens quite often. Same situation with the Westin and the Collective, the Olive next door. We've got a few feet off of that property line that has to be, screened and kept safe so people don't get in there, but it still is accessible for cleaning purposes and things like that.
So along those lines, the southeastern stairwell exits onto a space. I can't tell from the plans what's going on there, but are we taking everybody through a little 3 or 4 foot space? Again, if something's built next door, or I'm not sure what's on the site plan. I'm looking on attachment 29, for example.
There's approximately a 5.5 foot wide space that they would be able to navigate through once they got outside that stair.
So it's that great and accessible and so forth.
Yes.
I recognize you've got an array of transformers and whatnot in that bay off the alley, which is logical planning and so forth.
Yeah, they would be able to navigate to the east of those transformers and still have about 5 feet to work through.
Okay, and I know this is the back end, the nuts and bolts of the building, but I see that. I wonder what's going to happen. If we turn into Manhattan, we have apartments that are so close together. I know you can't plan for everything, but maybe Trevor can.
We're doing compacted stone between the properties. We are making use of an existing condition out there that kind of forms a retaining and a wall along that property line. And whenever someone develops the property adjacent to us, we will probably have some coordination with them to make sure that we identify what lighting would be appropriate at that ground level between the two. From our perspective, we're going to put in cutoff security safety lighting along there in the interim. And that is the stairwell you're referring to is really just emergency egress. We don't anticipate that being any kind of primary form of traffic for our pedestrians or our residents.
Again, let's just push that. I think you've done what you can over there, and I guess I want to applaud the other faces of the building and that nice commercial space to the north and northwest. I trust that that'll be well marketed and will be successful.
We feel confident that we'll find the right retailer for that location.
Okay, commissioners, other questions? Commissioner Amorosi.
Yes, speaking about the commercial, are you actively pursuing specific retail people? Do you work with other retailers in any of your other properties?
So we reached out to a local retail broker. I can't speak to that individual's name currently. Our development acquisitions team has been dealing with that broker directly, but we have some ideas what would be ideal for this location. We are not sure it will be a food service, but we certainly have a good location for that. We've talked about making sure that the patio outside was deep enough in case we want to put tables out there. It could be a combination of, a restaurant and a small retailer boutique. We want to find the right fit for that market and that location and demographic.
And do you manage the building personally, or do you have a outside company that's going to be managing the apartments, the residents?
We manage our buildings directly. We have an excellent property management staff that not only looks at all our properties across the nation, then we have regional, and then we'll hire someone locally to manage this and be dedicated to this market.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? All right, we will thank you. All right, Mr. Jimenez.
I think the power switch was just off. Let's see if this works. It's on, yeah. Yes. Okay, I guess it's working. Good evening. My name is Lee Jimenez. I'm a senior planner with the Community Development Department in the Planning Division. I just want to thank you for the presentation from the applicant. I'll just go over some of the facts of the case. The site is located in the CC City Center District and also within the TOD overlay district in the corridor, and also the original entitled 707 South Forest PAD, which was approved by City Council on August 20th, 2009, and then went through a couple of time extensions, which the last was approved on November 13th, 2018, which extended the approval through December 31st, 2020. The request for tonight's meeting consists of a DPR, which includes a 20-story building with proposed uses that include residential apartments, the ground floor lobby and leasing area, as well as commercial space, and then the rooftop amenity decks, along with the 4.5 levels of above grade parking within the total square foot building of 344,462 square feet on a half-acre site. The project provides 56 studio units, 56 one-bedroom units, 56 two-bedroom units, 30 three-bedroom, and 54 four-bedroom units above the levels of the garage, as well as the approximately 5,000 square feet of ground floor commercial space. There's no other planning entitlements requested with this. The proposed development meets all the development standards of the underlying CC zoning district, as well as the TOD and the entitled PAD overlay district. The original PAD established development standards for vehicle parking quantity and the maximum building height. And the primary difference between the original project and the new project is this project has 56 studio units, which the original project didn't have any. It also increased the number of one-bedroom units to 28, by 28, excuse me, up to 56, as well as the two-bedroom units from 28 to 56. There were no changes in the number of three and four-bedroom units, which are at 30 and 54 respectively. And the number of five-bedroom units was removed from the project. So that's a difference of minus 28 five-bedroom units down to 0. And then the commercial space from the originally approved project was reduced by approximately 1,500 square feet. The parking standards that were applied to this project is a blend of the reduced ratios of the approved PAD as well as the downtown standards that requires 191 parking spaces, in which 203 spaces are provided, which includes 13 on-street. And the building does not exceed the maximum approved building height with the PAD, which is 235 feet above grade. The site provides a 95% lot coverage. The provided front street side and rear building setbacks are 0 from the columns. The setbacks, I'm sorry, excuse me. So it's 0 feet from above the ground level, and then it's a 1 foot setback from the columns at the street, at the front and at the rear, and then a 3 foot side setback along the east side. And then the majority of the ground floor commercial has glazing storefront that is recessed 5 feet from the property line along the whole stretch of 7th, and then the north piece of Forest Avenue, and then there's a reduced, probably approximately 3 foot recessed area of storefront along the leasing and the lobby area from the development. And then the east, the garage entrance is located on the south end of the Forest Avenue frontage. And then the pedestrian walkways along 7th and 4th all provide the minimum 8 foot clear path that's required in the TOD. As far as the landscape concerns go, they're providing the required number of street trees along 7th and Forest. There's a planter box that's proposed on Forest between the parallel spaces and the building. And the parallel parking space trees are provided in individual landscape islands. And then the trees provided along 7th Street are provided in tree grates, and then also within the landscape islands for the parking row. So with all that said, staff does recommend approval of the project. The project meets the general plan, projected land use, and the projected residential density for the site. The project meets the development standards of the underlying zoning district and the PAD, and the project meets the approval criteria for a development plan review. So based on the information provided in the staff report, staff recommends approval of the DPR. This request meets all the criteria and will conform to the conditions of approval, which the applicant has stated that they are in agreement of all the recommended conditions of approval. I'll be available should you have any questions.
Commission, questions? Yeah, I have a couple if no one else does, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but I want to ask anyway. I know we have a PAD in place. We have several standards at play here. But I looked at this one and got just a little nervous about 530 beds in half an acre. So my question, I just feel like we need a steady hand for a project like that we make sure we have that right. And so the question, which I think I know the answer to, is staff comfortable with this density and this design?
Staff is comfortable with the density and the design. There is no increase in the number of bedrooms from the original approved project. They both are proposing 530 bedrooms. The only difference is a reduction of the 5-bedroom units, or reduction down to 0 for the 5-bedroom units, and then the increases to the 1 and 2-bedroom units. So it's an increase of number of units, but the bedrooms have remained the same. The number of bedrooms have remained the same. And the original PAD established standards for height and parking. All the other standards applied to the underlying zoning of the CC zoning district and the TOD, in which the project meets the underlying zoning standards for landscape coverage, building coverage, as well as setbacks as well.
Okay. Then my other question, which again, I think I know the answer to, and this will be a question for our applicant in a few minutes maybe. How does staff feel about the size of the units? Looking through the floor plans, some of them felt pretty small, even for a studio to me, and I wondered, where does somebody put their backpack down? How does this unit not become a mess? So the question is staff comfortable with the layouts and size of the units?
As far as the floor plans go, staff doesn't look into that too much. We look at it as far as the placement of windows and access into and out of the buildings. But as far as the floor layout, our purview of the review is mostly the site plan, the elevations, the landscape, the design on the outside exterior to the street. And then we do review the floor plans in terms of window locations and door locations, but not to the extent as far as whether we believe it's providing adequate living space per unit.
Okay, fair enough. Any other questions for Mr. Jimenez? Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.
All right, so at this time, we'd like to move on to our public comment section. If you have not already, please find one of these white cards on the side table, fill it out, get it to city staff. I can provide you 3 minutes, at which point I will become slightly impolite and ask you to wrap it up. First person I have here is Merrill Darcy.
Hello, my name is Merrill Darcy, and for the record, I'm a Tempe resident. I like the project. There's really nothing I can say about it. It's nothing bad, but a few things I'd like the commission to at least consider because of the new residents that are all moving into the adjacent apartments is that number one, that the noise ordinances be adhered to, which is during daylight hours and not any emergency for backup alarms or deliveries between the off hours at night, because a lot of people will be hearing it, especially when they do that. The second condition I'd like to bring up is that this project requires a safety arcade around it. There are too many pedestrians that are in this area that are walking on the street, walking in front of traffic, because the developer feels that because their setbacks are 3 feet or 5 feet, that they can fence off the property and have all the pedestrians walking on the street. So a safety arcade needs to be put in place on this project. The next big thing I have on this is the existing trees that the city put in that are 25 years old right now. They're southern live oaks. They're in good shape. They will be destroyed by this development. I want these protected. I want these trees to be at least have an arborist, just like City Hall did. They had the ficus trees there. You can do this, and the developer can do this. These are beautiful trees. They do not need to be cut down and put in elms in its place that are box trees. Thank you. If you have any questions, that was my concerns.
Mr. Brown.
When you refer to the safety arcade, do you mean the construction phase safety arcade?
Yes, just like they do in big cities.
Yeah.
We don't want people walking in front of the streets.
I think it's commonly required. I would hope that they would shake their head and say, yes, they're going to be safe. Okay, I wasn't sure.
Well, 7th Street doesn't have that.
For a minute, I thought you meant the design should have a deeper arcade for permanent pedestrian shade cover.
Yeah, I'm talking the temporary for barriers, because on 7th Street, there are too many pedestrians that are walking on the street next to the delivery trucks. There's no sidewalks there. They cut them all out. So that's my concern, that because this is a very extreme pedestrian area. This is like #1 in the city right now for pedestrians. This needs to be protected.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I have Mr. Trevor Barger.
Chairman Lyon, Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. Trevor Barger, downtown resident and now urban code master plan proposed resident. And Love living downtown, specifically chose to live at the edge of downtown because I like all of the urban things that go on. And as I've shared many times, pick my house based on the number of restaurants in the shortest distance. And so I love seeing development come to downtown. I think it's a very appropriate density for this sort of location because of the investment as citizens we've put in the downtown area in amenities, in transit. It has that tendency to be able to support those sort of things in this region, being close to ASU and those public amenities. I also like that we're trying smaller units. I'm someone who lives in a 1,000-square-foot house. My bedroom's 11 by 10. I did, however, turn one of the bedrooms into a closet as a result of lack of closets in a 1950s house. But I like going out and spending my time out of the house. The house is really a place to get ready in the morning, get dressed, and occasionally hang out in the evening. Representing the Newman Center, also appreciate Commissioner Brown's comments about how do you do this with an adjacent building there and things like that. As you may remember, a proposal in between the original approval and this one came forward basically requiring 70 feet of the property that we use as a parking lot for their clear zone around their buildings. Working with the applicant, returning more to the original design, which is intended to have another adjacent building next to it on the property that we control, being able to work out those pieces between the two of them and saying, okay, how do you do this? They were kind enough to turn all of the windows to the north and the south rather than to the east. And so we have that ability to have buildings next to each other in this area, creating an urban environment between the two of them. With the wonderful things that they've done on the street there to enhance kind of the pedestrian activity, we think this is a very appropriate use for downtown and look forward to this building being there and hope that you approve it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anyone else wishing to make comment? Seeing none, I will close the public comment section and invite our applicant to come and respond to what they've heard. We may ask a couple more questions again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Let's see, looking through my list here. So in terms of, I think Lee answered the question perfectly, the 530 beds, that's the existing condition in the PAD that we tried to maintain by removing the 5-bedroom units, working with staff on that to make sure that we maintain the existing condition in the PAD. In terms of the unit sizes, you know, obviously market conditions and new developments happening across the United States and in Tempe as well. We feel they're entirely appropriate. And we've got such a range in downtown Tempe right now. We've got West 6 that are almost micro sizes and up. I lived at Hayden Square. I had, you know, under 900 square feet. And that was a, you know, 2-bedroom unit. So, you know, the sizes range all over the place. Some of the union properties are very, very large. Some are smaller. So I think providing a range of units and a unit mix is really appropriate for the type of resident, you know, the millennials and new workers in the downtown area, bringing in lots of new types of jobs in the downtown. I think we're providing that variety and providing that for the citizens as well. Let's see. I agree with Mr. Darcy as well. You know, the noise ordinance must be complied with. It's something that we're very concerned about. Safety arcade, I believe, is a building code requirement. I don't know why the collective doesn't have that. I believe the sidewalk is closed, however, and I don't think anybody should be walking on that side. I think on that side because a fence is pulled out. And in terms of the street trees, we'll certainly take a look at that and see what can be done on those. It certainly can look into that, and Mark would know better than anybody if that can happen or not. And we thank Trevor and the church, obviously, for their support as well. Do you have any further questions, anything you need to ask?
Commissioner Morosi.
So Mr. Darcy asked about noise. What is the acoustics, the building, are they above average? You know, even between units, you do have airplanes flying by. What is your level?
Yeah, great
noise?
question, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Morosi. We have a stipulation in the requirements for I believe it's a 55 DBSTC. We exceed the stipulation requirements. interior walls as well as exterior walls. So we exceed those requirements. We've checked into that already.
Okay. Commissioner Brown.
I kind of agree with what Chairman Lyon mentioned. Some of the units seem kind of small. Some of the efficiencies have one window at a sort of a living space and the bedroom set back, which is tight and small. But I would agree maybe the marketplace will correct. So then I thought about asking the following questions, and that is that what will these rentals start at price-wise? Can we state
Obviously,
that?
that's a moving target always, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Brown. It's always a moving target. It really depends on delivery dates. Construction, we're anticipating starting construction fairly quickly. We would love to have gotten everything ready to go for tomorrow, but that's not realistic. So as soon as we can get construction started, as soon as the probably sometime in 2020 C of O, the market will then dictate the rental rates. So I don't know the range. I don't know if Jeff, you know the range, but really, anytime I answer that question at a hearing, it changes by the time the project opens. So
it's market driven. So that means you'll charge as much as you can and still rent them out.
Charge a reasonable amount.
That's what everyone. I mean, this is what real estate is involved, right? So the other concern I had was some of the units, besides being small, are facing. There are 530 bedrooms. 8 of them have a pedestrian walkway amenity deck 3 feet away, and those are a little tight. I'm not sure how that can be solved in your H configuration, because you will have that amenity deck. But I was also concerned about the H shape and the units facing each other, specifically the almost a third or almost a quarter of the upper floors. If something is built tall next door, you're going to have your view is going to be someone else's bedroom about as far away as you and I are, perhaps.
Very urban condition.
Yeah. So again, I guess the
growing up in
marketplace
Tempe.
corrects, and we live with that. We can't admit that we're not going to go down to a cottage, of course.
My apartment, my condo in Chicago was 20 feet from the condo next door.
Can I assume that the units with a better view would have a higher rent?
Yeah, that's.
I mean, the top floor, for example, it doesn't rent.
We need you to speak into the microphone. It's not that we can't hear you, it's for the recording.
Okay, so we're studying that. We want to be market rate. We look at our comps. We are a Class A project, so we are going to be top of the market, as are some other projects in downtown Tempe that are comparable projects to us. To speak to the courtyards and the units that are off the courtyards, in urban markets, we actually find that residents love to engage with the fun that's out there. So we are not seeing people not want to rent those units. If anything, they like to be there and people watch. We don't have any problem renting those, and in multiple markets with projects and similar condition. You like to be watch people, be seen, be part of the fun, and those courtyards, I think we're developing them to be quite engaging. Even the east one, if a project does down up against us, we have this great kind of lawn condition. That's where games are going to be played. I don't think anyone's going to be concerned about that building coming up beside us if one does. And as far as the views to the east, I think we addressed them to code to allow as much light as possible. There might be residential dialogue between roommates who gets the better room. But again, I don't think that having an east-facing window is a negative. We wanted to actually fight for those windows because we felt like all the light was appropriate.
Okay, one last question. I kind of conversed briefly with Darren Sender about this. The units were officially designed, and then you built 13 or 14 stories of them, 13 stories. The vertical mass was not necessarily developed. It was some hierarchy of masses and so forth. It's pretty much an extrusion. But the one perspective looked quite nice, and I don't remember the exact number. My question was, could that little cornice perhaps be a little more than just a little patch on one corner? It looks like a Band-Aid on one corner of the building. One of your perspective views showed it. The one where you said that the building in front was ghosted away?
The canopy that's over the pool and then also over the amenities on the south tower?
Yeah, that one. It looks a little like a little bit of a postage stamp. I wonder if that could be a little more of a cornice to actually work like the cornice does in the Chicago way.
I mean, I think we could do some studies, and this elevation may not depict I like the elevation with the night lighting because I think that's where it really
It did
grabs
look
your
nice. That's why I
attention.
thought maybe
Yeah.
a little more of that, because some of the other buildings in downtown have some corners, like the foundation building, for example, has lighting over a significant percentage.
We're working with the lighting team right now to figure out the best light fixtures and how to illuminate that. We want some illustrations so we, as developers, can see what that's going to look like. You're saying
I know
if
you
it's not
can't, you're not
impactful
going to
enough.
redesign on the fly. I'm not asking you to. I'm just saying that could perhaps be a little more impressive
Okay.
to reach out to the whole city instead of just one little corner. That's all. Thank you.
Oh,
Okay. Yeah, a little bit more uplighting and a little bit more
so I
light.
believe what he's saying is the physical
A little more canopy.
architectural element should be larger, not the lighting, but
Okay.
instead of that sort of smaller canopy, he's saying, could it be a larger part of, that whole elevation?
Exactly what I'm
How
trying to
much
express.
further we could project, but we can look at what's going on over our pool. I would have to work with planning to figure out how much more articulation would be allowed at that elevation. And not looking at it in plan view, I think it actually falls pretty close to our building edge.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Commissioner Johnson.
If I could just have a real quick follow-up on the tree discussion, I'm all for salvaging trees if that's possible, but in walking by and now looking at the aerials, I see mostly palm trees, and I don't know those are traditionally salvageable at the size that they are. I didn't notice any significant number of oaks if there were any at all.
Commissioner, I agree. I don't see the oak trees, just the palm trees.
And there's no plans to do
We
any
can
salvaging
talk.
of those palm trees?
We haven't talked about the palm trees, but if there were oak trees, that we could have that discussion as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so I guess my question dovetailing on that is, would our applicant be okay with the stipulation that they work with city staff regarding possible saving of any oak trees which may be found on the site?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to hear from city staff on how they would like to broach that.
Okay, I mean,
I'm very much a proponent of our trees on this job site because, as the planning department would say, I'm very much wanting as much green as possible. So I'd have to work with them on what can be done with the existing.
and usually when we do these stipulations, they're not set in stone. It's more of a recommendation that you have discussion with staff and see if it's feasible. And from what I'm hearing, there may not be any oak trees. So,
Okay. Yes.
all right.
So if you turn to your staff report on attachment, beginning on attachment 4, we have the site context photos. And just reviewing the photos, I don't see any oak trees. All I see are palms along 7th and Forest. I think that's across the street, yeah.
All right. Well, let's just not think any ill thoughts of those oak trees and be satisfied with that. All right. Other questions, comments for our applicant? Vice Chair DiDomenico.
Anyone who wants to answer, you guys, it sounds like you're fast tracking this. So construction drawings are underway or near completion. You picked a contractor.
Yes and no. Construction drawings not started yet. We wanted to have your approvals before we did anything like that. So that's something that we kind of hold back on. And I believe you have picked a contractor out of a couple very good applicants for that.
We would like to go as fast as you allow us to. We're excited. We're ready to go.
They're ready to go.
So you're not seeking a continuance tonight because we've only got 6?
We are not seeking a continuance tonight. We were very hopeful that you will see through to approve us case tonight.
Rolling the dice.
All right. Other questions? Well, thank you then.
Thank you.
All right. Commission, your thoughts? Commissioner Amorosi?
Yeah, I'd like to say that I'm really happy that you got rid of the 5-bedroom apartments. I think the studios and ones will be a lot more runnable, a lot better. And I like that you gave them, there seems to be a variety in the layout in the number of units. So you're giving tenants a choice as to how they want their apartments laid out. So I kind of like that. Some people like windows, some people don't. So I'm not too worried about that part of it. But I think overall, I like the design of the building and what you did on the site, the H shape. I'm going to vote for it. I like it.
Other comments? Commissioner Vice Chair DiDomenico?
I never thought I'd get a chance to vote a decade later on the same project. So, but I did go back into my notes and I found that I supported it before. So, you know, I don't want to be inconsistent. So I'll be in support of the project.
Well, I'll just chime in very quickly. I think it's a good project. I am a little nervous. Maybe it's just because I'm not interested in being a college kid living in a wild place. And I look at this and I think it's going to be a madhouse when people are moving in and out. And, the small rooms and things. It's perfect for somebody, and maybe that somebody's not me anymore. But I'm willing to support the project myself. Any other comments, or shall we have a motion? Let's have a motion.
I'll jump in. Mr. Chairman, I move approval of PL 190223 with the stipulations as drafted and presented in the advertised packet. We didn't have any other steps. Oh, and with the understanding or stipulation that applicant will work with staff to maintain the integrity of any mature trees that may exist on the site currently.
Second. All right. So let me ask you, when you say any mature trees, are you including palm trees in that?
No, I was not including. I didn't
trees?
mean, yeah.
They're weeds.
They're weeds. Yeah, not the tall, skinny weeds.
All right. So
Not
mature trees, which does not include palms. All right. All those in favor, well, let me do this part. We have a motion to approve with that stipulation from Vice Chair DiDomenico and seconded by Commissioner Brown. All those in favor, by show of hands, please. And the motion passes 6-0. Thank you. All right, so let's move on to our last case for the night, which is Code Text Amendment Short-Term Rental. Mr. Levesque.
Members of the Commission, my name is Ryan Levesque, Deputy Director in the Community Development Department. The request before you is a code text amendment within the Zoning Development Code for short-term rental ordinance. This ordinance would adopt a new section 3-428, and have other amendments regarding the regulation of vacation and short-term rentals as authorized by state law. Back in late 2017, there was a city managers working group that was formed to discuss concerns and issues raised from some of the residents about the recent state law changes that basically the governor of Arizona had authorized into state law. Those provisions basically preempted cities from regulating or controlling the use of a vacation rental within one's own home or single family property, meaning that the state would allow this by right and local control would be limited based on their ability to utilize a home or property. We discussed with the working group a lot of questions and concerns that centered around the number of occupancy or the complaints that centered around some of these vacation rentals, concerns for excessive parties, concerns for high occupancy within these dwellings, some secondary effects, parking situations of that manner. And a lot of those items were addressed on how could we resolve those through code compliance matters. Later on this year, there was an amendment to the short-term rental regulations for the state Senate bill that had 2672 and it's provided in your attachments that basically provided some relief, some regulation control for local cities, municipalities on how to regulate. And basically within that, the city manager's working group had drafted an ordinance that contained the following, that would require contact information for the owner and an emergency contact for information that be displayed at the short-term rental. It requires the owner to update their contact information within 10 days of the effective date of any change for the ownership. It requires city manager or designee to develop the necessary forms for a database to collect this information. It requires short-term rentals to comply with all federal and local laws, rules, and regulations. It clarifies that non-residential use and requires the list of non-residential uses to be displayed in the short-term rental. It requires that owners of short-term rental obtain a transaction privilege tax license before operating the rental. And then it clarifies that short-term rental operator may not offer the rental without the transaction privilege tax license. And then as well a definition for vacation rental or short-term rental. So the ordinance drafted was presented to the public summary input for public input. We've got an attachment of that public summary. We had multiple communication feedbacks from it. We also went to a neighborhood advisory commission and got their feedback and support for this request. And now we're going through the public hearing process to seek adoption for the request. I'll open up any questions if the commission has any at this time.
Commissioners.
Wanting to hear this, I did read through some of the public comments, and I think the one that stood out the most to me was kind of the owner-occupied comment came up a lot versus someone who is not on site, never there. And I wanted to understand what staff has done, or if that is not a part of the legislation allowed under the governor's bill.
So if you are owning the property and you still reside on site, and if you do rent out your additional bedrooms, that is less than 30 days, basically a typical rental agreement is at least 30 days or longer. And so if you offer for rent less than 30 days, it's defined as a vacation rental, and it's under that special privilege tax license process. And so they would be under the obligations of this process to adhere to these regulations. The intent of the regulation is not to limit or restrict whether someone is fully renting out as a vacation rental of the property or just a portion thereof. It's just to make sure that we have contact information documentation to make sure that they're following our state and local laws. And there's the ability to be able to contact them if an issue arises, or whether it was a result of excessive parking or any nuisance within the area. We have contact information available that can be used by either police department or code compliance to address any matters regarding any issue or circumstance that would arise from the rental.
Just one more follow-up for the transactional tax license. If a person owned multiple properties, would they need those for each dwelling unit, or would an institutional buyer who had multiple investment properties, would that all fall under one tax license?
If they do intend to rent them as short-term rentals, then yes, they would have to register each of the property for those sites.
Commissioner Brown.
Well, can I guess that it's really none of our concern whether as long as they comply and pay that tax, which helps support all sorts of good things. That's not really the issue so much as you want you want to know who to call to have that emergency contact information, et cetera, to handle issues in case they do have a blatant parking violation that you can enforce.
Correct, that's correct.
Because I know general contractors have one tax license and they might be building 3 homes at once in Tempe, or in Chandler anyway. So I'm not sure if that's really actually a concern, a deep concern.
No, I think it will make it potentially more challenging for someone to come in, and they would have to register multiple, which may end up in the long run with less short-term rentals, which is also a concern of many of our citizens. So.
Okay. Other questions? Commissioner Amoroso.
So Ryan, on the this database, so if a neighbor says, I know my neighbor's renting this house as a short-term rental, and they could publicly look at this database, or is this just a city database to see if they're registered there? And then if they are, or they aren't on that list, does this give this ordinance give more enforcement to the city? They can go in there. What's the penalty? Is there a better, how does this work?
So the database is intended not as for public accessibility for the database. It's intended to inform our city officials, the departments necessary that need this information to determine if, one, is it a rental property that's supposed to be licensed, and their sales tax and license folks will help determine with compliance with state law to see if they're in compliance with that portion. The police department will utilize it to determine if is there an emergency contact person that they need to contact to address a certain situation that may be on the site. Code compliance, that'll help code compliance address any matters for any continuing nuisances that may come, say loud parties. Typically, we try to address it with the residents at hand, but we know from a short-term rental, they're there for maybe a week and then they're gone and there's no one to contact, reach out to. We want to make sure we're able to contact the property owners or have the right property management contact and address the issues that may arise. So it's intended to use as a city database for access with whether it's PD, code compliance, or sales tax and license office.
So it would be the tax people go over to that house to see if it's short-term rental, or they contact the owner?
They'll do, in fact, they'll do their own checks and balances. They don't even share their information with other city departments on whether or not they have a current sales tax license with the state. They have very specific confidential information that they'll double check and see. If a complaint arises, they'll say, thank you for the complaint. They'll look into it and address the matter appropriately.
So how does the neighbors, the resident, how do they know if it's even being taken care of? Who do they call then if this is confidential?
The information is necessary and so we can basically be able to collect that information, have an appropriate contact. If we know there's reoccurring issues with a rental property, they usually fall under these two classifications. Either there's no homeowner there and it's a rental, or they're under this other classification that basically maybe there's not a consistent resident there that's able to contact it. This gives the city an allowance to kind of contact with the state legislature, find out sales tax, and sales tax and license will communicate with the state on their process and determine if this truly is a short-term rental. And then we can get that information material in the database so that if there is any PD issues, they can respond accordingly. And if there is any code compliance issues, then they have an appropriate contact to respond to. It's not really intended to identify and put on a map and listing like who are my short-term rental properties just in the area. It's an ability to collect the information and be able to appropriately respond to any issues that may arise. So if the citizens or residents of Tempe have concerns related to loud parties with excessive vehicles and whatnot, then we can appropriately address it with the right party for who controls that property.
But those kind of issues can be dealt with on any kind of house, whether it's owner occupied or not, if it's a code compliance thing. What I'm talking about is enforcing the short-term rental property, and in and of itself, are there special agents that are going to be, dedicated to looking into this, or is it, I think what citizens are worried about is they're popping up all over, and if this can be the city's means to get into trying to regulate this, then shouldn't they be putting something forward that says this is how we can do this now?
I do want to clarify that although we do have our typical local laws that we regulate and enforce, there is a greater level of enforcement through informing our state state laws. There's an ability for the state and the Arizona ADAR, Arizona Department of Revenue, to issue and address fines and fines that can escalate. And so that really puts a pressure on the short-term rental to behave, follow local laws and ordinances, and make sure that they are abiding by those local laws that the cities have enforced. And so that gives us some added local power to making sure that they do comply with our neighborhoods and make it a peaceful environment, and have that expectation that when a short-term rental is within the neighborhood, that they are complying with all those laws, local laws.
So does the city get a cut of that penalty, or do they have their own?
I do not believe we do not get a cut of that.
Can you create a penalty?
These are the citations and fines are established by the Arizona Department of Revenue, but they're not a direct resource for the city of Tempe.
So can the city, though, add to that?
I do not believe so. I can ask, though.
Okay, and my other question is, does this also cover boarding houses? Because I'm hearing from residents that people are making their house boarding houses.
So what would you define a boarding house?
Well, that would be it's owner occupied, and then they have like 4 or 5 bedrooms, and each one is rented out to somebody else.
Okay, that would fall under our classification of a bed and breakfast, meaning that if you're owner, you can rent out rooms within your home. There actually still is a use permit process within the code. A lot of people think just renting out bedrooms separately is a restriction, but it's allowed in all cities. You can rent. There's no restrictions on how many bedrooms you can rent within a property. We do make sure with this classification too that they also follow our local building code requirements, and as it's become a new occupancy change, a transient lodging. So we make sure they meet with our building safety staff to make sure they comply with local ordinances for occupancy safety. So that is some additional measures as well that they have to abide by.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Thank you, Mr. Levesque.
Thank you.
Public comment section. Does anyone here wish to make a comment? Darcy? All right, if you can fill out a card for us. Well, actually, I have 2 cards for you from the previous case. Change one of them to say this number.
You have a card that I filled out. It should be up there.
Are you okay with me changing the number on one of these that it corresponds with this one? Oh, wait, I see. Oh, sorry. You've already done exactly that. I'm sorry. I misread
Other
it.
technology, Mr. Bond.
All right, lay it on us, Mr. Garcia.
I read the House bill, and there's a few things that I want clarified, just for the record. One was the House bill did specifically say that it was 4 bedrooms or less. In other words, an applicant or an owner could not rent anything more than 4 bedrooms. I remember saying that. But as far as the transaction privilege license, we all know that if we have 4 or 5 dogs, we need 4 or 5 licenses. However, if we have 1 rental, we need 1 TPT license. But if we have 60 rentals, we still need only 1 TPT license. There's no clarification on this bill that there should be an additional fee for an additional unit. I mean, it's $50 right now for the initial fee for a transaction privilege license, but there is nothing that's on there for an additional unit. So some of these people have like 5, 6, 7, or 20 units, and this is how you regulate it. You have to put some kind of teeth in that. You just can't have 1 license that covers a blanket of all these. There's also instances in the neighborhood where I live in Tempe and Riverside, that a few people have purchased apartment complexes, the smaller 2-story ones, having maybe 30, 40 units and all of these are short term. There's no mail. you can actually ask the mailman about that. But these are temporary structures. There were temporary apartments for temporary living. Maybe they're by dormitories but they seem to be cheap enough, and they seem to be very prevalent with some of the neighbors that live around there. I like that. But I'd like some clarification on at least the fee. There has to be some kind of change on that. Preferably, I like host. I use Airbnb. I use this a lot, and I always look for a host on site. And in other words, you have a complaint, you can talk to the host. And this law and this ordinance seems to be directed more to like absentee owners and not really host on occupied. You wouldn't have this problem with a accessory dwelling unit that somebody lives in the front, rents out the back for short-term rental or something like that. Those complaints can be addressed usually real easily, and a lot of the people want to accommodate with the neighbors around the area anyway. I think it's more for the absentee or the off-host type of establishments. Okay, thank you. If you have any comments or questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Darcy? All right, Mr. LeVake.
Yes, I can certainly follow up with our sales tax license to find out what specifically they require, whether it's multiple properties or whether it's an individual based on the business location. It should be noted, though, too, that the state has also taken away our ability to administer the sales privilege tax license process. So basically, the state's taken that over now. We just have to wait for that information to come back from them to collect that information. So a lot of it is all handled at the state level now. But I can certainly ask those questions and find out.
Okay, any more questions for Mr. LeVake? Thank you. Commission? Do we want to hear a motion? Do we want to express an opinion first?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve the short-term rental ordinance PL 190238.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, motion to approve from Commissioner Amorosi, seconded by Commissioner Johnson. All those in favor by show of hands, please. The motion passes 6-0. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is the entirety of our program for the night. Suparna, do you want to read us out with any upcoming projects?
Chairman, the commission will be receiving the next agenda, which is November 12th. Right now, you should receive it this week, the final agenda. But there is a request for a development plan review for Raising Cane at 5201 South McClintock Drive, aka the old Quick Wax site. So it's.
Oh, I can't wait.
That was supposed to be a walkable library or something, according to. Wow.
A request for a development plan review for 7,000 square foot of restaurant for Twin Peaks at the Tempe Marketplace. And then we have 2 use permits. One is for a second-story addition to a single-family residence at 1165 East Diamond Drive. And the second one is a request for 2 use permit standards to reduce the front yard setback by 20% and from 20 feet to 16 feet, and to reduce the required setback to an accessory dwelling unit for a minimum district standard of 5 feet for the Dedic residence at 1030 East Carson Drive. And then we also have the East Line PAD, which you have seen the presentation couple of meetings ago. The development agreement for that was approved by City Council on October 17th, which authorizes the PAD to be processed separate from the DPR. So you'll see the zoning case first, and then the DPR would follow after that, sometime after that. So those are the cases for right now for the next meeting.
I just wanted to thank staff for arranging our dinner this evening. That was very nice. Happy planning month. Is it month? Week?
Planning month, October is planning month, yes, National Planning Month.
Thank you.
Well
Yes,
said.
everybody, if there's leftovers there, please don't let it go to waste. Wonderful.
Thank
Well
you.
said.
We appreciate your service. too.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned. Yeah, that quick